This is Introduction to Mathematics Intermediate Level. This course is facilitated by Limitless Learning TT, where it's all about learning on the go. Log into our website from any place at any time and view past videos, practice problems, and solutions for your course. For more information on the services we offer, please visit www.limitlesslearningtt.com. If you have any additional questions or concerns, you can send us an email at info@limitlesslearningtt.com. In today's lesson, we'll be doing a refresher on some of the types of numbers that we already know, and we'll be introducing the concept of integers. So in the previous course, which is Introduction to Mathematics Beginner Level, we explored types of numbers, particularly focusing on natural numbers and whole numbers. So let's do a refresh. What is natural numbers? Natural numbers are counting numbers. So these are numbers such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth, 101, 1,017,017. Anything that are natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, counting numbers, right? So those are natural numbers. Then we spoke about whole numbers. So whole numbers are where we add 0 to our natural numbers. So whole numbers include the number 0. So whole numbers now have the number 0 included. So these are 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Now the difference between natural numbers and whole numbers is that all natural numbers are whole numbers, but not all whole numbers are natural numbers. For example, if I pick any natural number, 5, 6, 12, 11, 1, any number that I pick that is a natural number will be a whole number. But if I pick 0, which is a whole number, 0 isn't a natural number. Okay, so whole numbers are different from natural numbers because whole numbers include the number 0. Now, we're going to introduce another type of number. This number is known as an integer. So what is an integer? So integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. What does that really mean? The best way to kind of show what integers would be is to use a number line. Now, when we used a number line in the previous course, our number line would have stopped or started at 0 and gone towards the right. With integers, our number line does not stop at 0. So let's use a number line to show what integers are. So this is our new number line. Our number line before, right? So the number line that we had before started at 0, which was here, and only went towards the right-hand side. We now have a number line that goes further than 0. So our number line, from 0, there's something that goes towards the left, and those are called negative numbers. So if you start at 0 and you move one place to the left, that's negative 1. If you move another place to the left, that's negative 2. Another place to the left, that's negative 3, and so forth. So on the left side of our origin, we now have something that's known as negative numbers. And then on the right side of our origin, we now have something that's known as positive numbers. Now, all of these numbers are known as integers. The arrows on our number line indicate that our numbers keep going. So on the right-hand side, it's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1 million, 2 million. On our left-hand side, on our right-hand side. On our left-hand side, it keeps getting negative. So negative 10, negative 11, negative 12, negative 13, negative 20, negative 40, negative 100, negative 1,000,000. Okay, so all of these numbers that are made up of positive numbers and negative numbers are known as integers. Now let's look at integers in more detail. So just to remind you what our definition of integers is, it's the set of whole numbers and their opposites. So remember, we know whole numbers to be this set here: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and continuing. And the opposites, right, are going to be on this side. Okay, so it's a set of whole numbers and their opposites. So let's talk a little bit about this new number line. The number line goes on forever in both directions indicated by the arrows. So whenever you have a number line and you have arrows on either side, it just means that your number line continues onward. So you don't want to have to write 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 40, 41, 42, 43, 100, 1 million. So instead, you just put arrows to show that your number line goes on and on and on forever. Okay, the second point is everything that's to the right of 0, right, that are whole numbers greater than 0, these are called positive integers, right? Positive integers or positive numbers. So that's everything that's on this side here. All the blue numbers, those are known as positive integers or positive numbers, right? Now, on the left-hand side, the next point, if you have any numbers that are less than 0, those are numbers that are on the left side of 0 on the number line. These are negative integers. So all of these numbers here going on forever, those are called negative integers or negative numbers. Now, the next point is that our number 0, that's right here in the middle, it's not positive and it's not negative. So 0 is like a neutral number. It's nothing. So it can be positive and it cannot be negative. It's just 0. Sometimes 0 is called the origin. Sometimes it's called neutral. It just means 0, right? So 0 is not positive and 0 is not negative. Right? Now, the last point says that two integers are opposite if they are the same distance away from 0 on opposite sides of the number 0. So let's say we have the number 6, that's right here. 6 is how many away from 0? It's 6 away from 0, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we wanted to find the opposite of 6, we have to start at 0 and move 6 places to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That gives me negative 6. So therefore, 6 and negative 6 are opposites. So that's how you find the numbers and the opposite of them. So 6, negative 6. 12, negative 12. 1 million, negative 1 million. 40, negative 40. All of these are numbers that are kind of opposite to each other. Well, they say opposite to each other. So now we have a new number line which kind of shows us what integers are. So integers, again, are numbers that can be positive or negative, and they also include the number 0. So remember when we were in the other course, the previous course, and we would have something like 3 minus 9. We couldn't do it, right? Because remember, we only had one portion of our number line. So it's as though we only had the right portion of our number line. So only this right side portion of our number line existed. So when we were at 3, and we wanted to move 9 places to the left, 1, 2, 3, we had to stop at 0. Now, because we now have this new number line that incorporates our negative numbers, it means that we can continue moving towards the left. So let's try a couple of examples with this new number line. So let's say we wanted to do 3 minus 9. We start at 3, so we put a dot at 3. And remember, when we're subtracting, we move to the left. When we're adding, we move to the right. So I can now do 3 minus 9. I'm going to move 9 places to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 3 minus 9 is now minus 6. Let's try another one. Suppose we wanted to do 9 minus 12. We start at 9, we put a dot at 9, and then we move 12 places to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So now 9 minus 12 is minus 3. So because we've now introduced integers, which includes positive and negative numbers, we can do subtraction that we weren't able to do before in the previous course. So when we have our nice number line that shows our integers, it's always good to remember that when you move to the right, you're adding. When you move to the left, you subtract. So when you move to the right on the number line, you're generally adding a number. When you move to the left, you're taking away a number. Also, okay, just to recap again, if we move to the right side of the number line, it means that we're going to be adding a number. If we move to the left side of our number line, it means that we are subtracting a number. Also, if we move to the right side of our number line, it means that our numbers are getting larger. If we move to the left side of our number line, it means that our numbers are getting smaller. So let's look at some examples. Suppose I am at 7. And I'm looking at 7 and I'm looking at the number 2. 7 is further to the right on my number line, so it must mean that 7 is larger than the number 2. What if I had this number here, negative 4? 7 is also further to the right than negative 4. So 7 has to be larger than negative 4. What if I was looking at 2 and negative 4? Well, negative 4 is further to the left than the number 2. So negative 4 has to be smaller than the number 2. What if I were to put a dot right here at negative 9? Negative 9 is further to the left than negative 4. So it must mean that negative 9 is smaller than negative 4. So the more you go to the left, the smaller the number. The more you go to the right, the larger the number. And then when we jump across, when we're adding, we move to the right. So if we add like this, we're moving to the right. When we're subtracting, we move to the left-hand side. So, we've introduced the concept of negative numbers, but it's something that we've never worked with before. So let's try to explain how negative numbers work. So this is my drawing. It's going to help us with negative numbers. Now, I'm not an artist, but this is the best that I can do. So in the red, these are balloons, okay? So I have balloons attached to a box. So the red stuff, those are balloons. The blue things on the bottom are weights. And then my black drawing is a box. Now we know that balloons make things rise or move upwards, right? And weights, it weighs down or pulls down stuff. So my weights are going to pull down my box and my balloons are going to help my box to rise. Now we're going to think of the weights as negative numbers. So when I talk about weights, I'm really talking about negative numbers, right? Because negative numbers pull things down, right? When I talk about my balloons, I'm talking about positive numbers. Okay, so now we're going to talk about positive and negative numbers with adding and subtracting. Now, if I wanted to add a positive number, right? So I'm going to add a positive number. That means I add a balloon. There are more balloons to the top of the box than to the bottom of the box. So when I add a balloon, I move upwards because I have more balloons. So when I add a positive number, I move upwards. And if I move upwards, I become greater, right? So I move upwards, I'm more positive, right? What if so I'm going to take off that balloon that I just added. Right? And what if instead I added a weight? So if I add a weight, I become smaller, so I pull it downwards. So if I add a weight, and remember a weight is the same thing as a negative number. So if I add a negative number, I move downwards. So when I add a negative number, I move downwards, I get smaller. Okay, so when I add a weight, I get smaller, I decrease. Right, so when I add a weight, I move downwards or I get smaller. Okay, what happens if I take away weights? So if I take away weights, I'm going to take away this one and maybe this one. So when I take away weights, when I take away the weights, which means that I am taking away a negative number, because remember a negative number is the same thing as a weight. So when I take away a weight, it has nothing that's weighing the box down. So my box is going to move upwards. So when I take away a weight, my box moves upwards, and that means I get larger. So I am going to move, when I take away weights, I move upwards, which means that I get larger. So what am I trying to show you? Right? When I add a positive number, I move upwards. So let's say I have 4 and I add 3. I move upwards. I get larger. Right? If I have 4 and I add a negative number, so I have 4, I'm going to add a negative number, let's say negative 2, right? I get smaller. So when I add a negative number, I get smaller. And when I take away, so if I have 4, and if I take away a negative number, let's say negative 2, I am going to get larger. So that's the rule. Okay, again, I'm going to show you again using this balloon and weights so that you understand that when we get to the math, it makes more sense. Okay, so let's revisit this again. So again, I have a box. My box has balloons to the top. It has weights at the bottom. My balloons help things to rise or move upwards or get larger. My weights pull things down. It pulls it downwards. It makes things smaller. When I think about my balloons, I'm thinking of my balloons as positive numbers. When I'm thinking about my weights, I'm thinking about my weights as negative numbers. So if I were to add a positive number, so if I add a positive number, which is a balloon, so I'm going to add another balloon. If I add another balloon, there are more balloons to the top than weights at the bottom. So because I have more balloons on top, it's going to rise up. My box is going to move upwards. So that means my number is going to be larger. So when I add positive numbers, I get larger. Okay? What about if I were to take away positive numbers? So I'm going to take away these balloons. I take away this one, I take away this one. Well, if I take away balloons, that means that there are more weights on the bottom and it's going to pull it downwards. So when I subtract positive numbers, I get smaller. Right? I get smaller because it has more weights on the bottom, so it's going to pull my box downwards. And when I move downwards, I get smaller. What if now I was concerned about my weight? So I'm going to put back this balloon here. I'm going to put back this other balloon here. Let's say now I wanted to add some weights. So I'm going to add a weight here. I'm going to add another one here. I'm going to add another one here. So now I have 6 weights at the bottom. I only have 4 balloons on the top. So my box is going to move downwards because it has more weights. So when I add weights, which are negative numbers, so when I add a negative number or add negative numbers, I get smaller. Right? And that makes sense because I have more things that are weighing my box down, more things that are pulling my box down. So I must get smaller. Right? What if I take away my weights? So I'm going to take away or subtract my weight. So I don't have this weight here anymore. I don't have this one anymore. So I only have 2 weights at the bottom and I have more balloons on the top. So when I take away weights, my box moves upwards, which means that I get larger. So when I subtract negative numbers, I get larger. Or I move upwards. So as I move upwards, I'm getting larger. So these are the things that I know, right? Using this analogy. When I add positive numbers, I get larger. When I subtract positive numbers, I get smaller. When I add negative numbers, I get smaller. And when I subtract negative numbers, I get larger. Because remember, when you take away those weights, you have less weights weighing down your box, so you get larger. So we're going to remember these 4 points, and now we're going to use our math symbols to see how we work this out. Okay, so let's try and look at these with our number line as much as we can, because the number line would only work for a couple of these examples. So let's say we're adding a positive number. So we are we'll start at 1. And we're going to add a positive number, which is 5. So we're adding 5. 5 is a positive number. So that means we're moving 5 places to the left. Sorry, to the right. So at 1, we put our dot at 1. We move 5 places to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to give us 6. 6 is larger than 1. 6 is larger than 5, right? Because we're adding, remember, we're starting at 1. We're adding 5. So whatever we get has to be greater than 1. So we've added 5. we ended up with 6. 6 is greater than 1. So therefore, we did get larger, right? So when we add a positive number, this is the positive number that we're adding. When we add that positive number, we get larger. We end up with 6, which is larger than 1. Okay. Let's try another one. We're at 1, right? We're going to take away a positive number. The positive number we're going to take away is 4. Okay? So this is the positive number here. We're taking away 4. We start at 1. If we're taking away, we move to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we end up with -3. So we started at 1. We ended up with -3 because we took away a positive number. So when we took away this positive number from 1, we ended up with -3, and we know that -3 is smaller than 1 because it lies -3, which is here, is closer to the left than 1, so it must mean that -3 is smaller. So we've shown that when we subtract positive numbers, we get a smaller number. And let's look at this one. This one is a little tricky. When we add a negative number, so let's suppose that again we have 1. We want to add a negative number. So let's say the negative number we want to add is -3. Okay, so we have 1 and we want to add -3. Now this is where using the number line doesn't help us because we don't know how to add a negative number on the number line. We only know how to add and subtract positive numbers on our number line. So when we're talking about adding and subtracting negative numbers, we need to use something new that's going to help us to know what to do. So when we're adding a negative number, you see that we have an addition sign here, and then we have a minus sign here, because that's how we represent negative numbers. When we have an addition sign and a minus sign coming together, we create one new sign, and that one new sign is going to be a negative sign. So when we have a positive sign and a negative sign, that makes a negative sign. So I'm saying that 1 plus -3 becomes 1 minus 3. Okay, so new thing that we just learned, when we have a positive sign or an addition sign that's next to a negative sign, which is a minus sign, that becomes one sign, which is a minus sign. Okay, and now that we have 1 minus 3, we can actually do that using our number line. So 1, we're going to start at 1, which is here, and we're going to take away 3. 1, 2, 3, and we end up with -2. -2 is smaller than 1. That's what we originally started with. We said 1, and we wanted to add a negative number. This was the negative number that we added, and we ended up with -2, and -2 is smaller than 1. So it's true. When we add negative numbers, we get smaller. Okay? So I'm just going to put this under this here. So this is 1. This became 1 minus 3, and 1 minus 3 is -2. Now we're going to look at this one when we subtract a negative number. So let's say again we're starting with 1. 1 subtract, and let's say we're going to subtract -3. Now we can't subtract or add negative numbers on a number line, right? We can only add a positive number or subtract a positive number. We have two signs here. When we have a negative sign followed by a negative sign, this becomes a positive sign. Okay, so remember the first one, we had a positive sign and a negative sign. That became a negative sign. And when we have a negative sign and another negative sign, that becomes a positive sign or an addition sign. So this now becomes 1 plus 3. And 1 plus 3 is 4. So when we subtract a negative number, this is the negative number that we subtracted, we get larger. We started at 1, we ended up at 4. 4 is greater than 1, so we got larger. So I know this is a little bit tricky. You haven't done this before. It looks difficult, but I promise the more examples we do is the more that you're going to get accustomed to this concept of negative integers. So let's do some more examples. So let's say that I wanted to find out what is 11 minus negative 4. I have two signs that are coming here. A negative sign with another negative sign. So I'm going to just refresh our memory on the side here. So if we have a positive sign and a negative sign, we end up with a negative sign. If we have a negative sign followed by a negative sign, we end up with a positive sign. And it doesn't matter if the positive sign comes first, as in if we have a negative sign and then a positive sign, it's still going to be a negative sign. Right? So once you have one positive and one negative, it becomes a negative sign. And if you have two negative signs, it becomes a positive sign. So in our question here, we have 11 minus negative 4. This becomes plus. So I now have 11 plus 4. And 11 plus 4 on our number line will be 15. It's not on this number line. Let's try another one. Let's say that we had 15 plus negative 7. Right, we have a positive sign and a negative sign, so that becomes a negative sign, and we now have 15 minus 7, and 15 minus 7 is going to be what? 8. Let's try another one. What if we had negative 12 plus 4? Well, that's easy, right? We can use our number line to help us find this. So at our number line, we're going to start at negative 12. So we put a dot at negative 12. And then remember, we're adding 4. So when we add a positive number on our number line, we move 4 places to the right. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That becomes negative 8. What if instead we had 20 plus negative 13? We have a positive and a negative sign coming together, so that's a negative sign. We have 20 minus 13. 20 minus 13 is 7. Okay, so this is doing the simpler questions using our positive and negative numbers. So suppose we didn't have small numbers to work with. Suppose we were working with large numbers, and we were working with large negative numbers and large positive numbers. How are we going to be able to figure that out? Now, let's look at an example to see what we're talking about. Let's suppose we had Let's say we had 40 minus 70. Now remember, before, when we were doing subtraction in the previous course, we could not take a larger number from a smaller number. But because now we've introduced integers, we can do any subtraction we want because we know we can get negative numbers or positive numbers as our result. So we have 40 minus 70. If we were on a number line, it will be easy to figure it out for small numbers. So suppose we had, instead of 40 minus 70, we had 4 minus 7. If we had our number line, it would be easy to figure out, right? We'd be at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say we were going negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. And we had to figure out 4 minus 7. We would start at 4, and then we would move 7 places to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we would end up with negative 3. Now, unfortunately, we don't have 4 and 7. We have 40 and 70. And to do this on a number line would take forever. So how do we figure out what our question is, what our answer is going to be? Now, whenever you're taking a larger number away from a smaller number, you already know that you're going to get a negative number. So the first thing, so a smaller number minus a larger number gives us a negative number. So it's the first thing that we wanna mention and note. Smaller number minus larger number gives me a negative number. My smaller number is 40. My larger number is 70. So I'm going to get a number that is negative. So I'm going to put the negative sign one time. How do I figure out what that number is? I'm just going to do 70 minus 40. 0 from 0 is 0. 4 from 7 is 3. So my answer is going to be negative 30. That's how you figure it out. So first you indicate whether you're taking a larger number away from a smaller number. You know it's going to be equal to a negative number. You put the negative sign one time. And then you do the larger number minus the smaller number. So that's the little trick. And remember, we just did this question here. 4 minus 7 is equal to negative 3 using our number line. We showed that. We're going to use this same technique here. So 4 minus 7 should give me a negative number. So I put a negative sign one time. And then I do 7 minus this is ones, right? Then I'm going to do 7 minus 4, and that's going to give me 3. So my answer is negative 3. So whenever we have a smaller number minus a larger number, we get a negative number. So we put a negative sign, and then we just take away the smaller number from our larger number. Let's try another example because this looks a little bit tricky, and I don't want you all to get confused. So let's do another example. Suppose I had 11 minus 24. Okay, so 11 minus 24. 11 is my smaller number, 24 is my larger number, so I have smaller number minus larger number. That's going to be equal to a negative number. I put my negative sign, and then I have my tens, my ones. I do 24 minus 11. 1 from 14 is 3. 1 from 4 is 3. 1 from 2 is 1. So therefore my answer is negative 13. And if you were to actually use a number line, you would see that this is true. Let's try another example. Let's say I had 47 minus 62. Okay, so I have a smaller number minus a larger number. I'm going to put a negative sign. Then I'm going to put tens, ones. 62 is the larger number. 47 is the smaller number. 7 from 2, I can't. So I have to go and take one of my tens. This is 10 ones. So this becomes 12. 12. And I now have 12 minus 7, which is 5. 5 minus 4, which is 1. So my answer is negative 15. So whenever I have a smaller number minus a larger number, I get a negative number. Okay, so I'm going to put this right up here. Then what if I had a negative number minus a number? Okay, so I now have, for example, negative 50 minus 20. So this is the rule. So negative number, take away a positive number. My number is 20. So I have negative 50. I'm taking away my positive number 20. I'm going to end up with a negative number. And if I have a negative number minus another number, how am I going to find the answer? I'm going to add them. So tens, ones, 50, 20, add them, and I get 70. So my answer is negative 70. So that's the trick when when taking away a positive number from a negative number. Let's try that again with another example. So, negative number. Let's say we have minus 61 minus 24. Right? Negative number minus a positive number, which is 24, is going to give me a negative number, so I put my negative sign. Then I do tens and ones, and I add the two numbers. 61 plus 24. 1 plus 4 is 5. 6 plus 2 is 8. So I get negative 85. Let's try another one. Negative 137 minus 21. So I have a negative number minus a positive number, which is 21. I'm going to get a negative number. I put my hundreds, my tens, and my ones. 137 plus 21. And that gives me 7 plus 1 is 8. 3 plus 2 is 5. 1 plus 0 is 1. So that gives me 158. My answer is negative 158. And the last thing that I'm going to show you is if you have a negative number plus a positive number. So let's say we had negative 16 plus 32. Now this one is the trickiest one out of them all. Okay, so we have negative 16 plus 32. The first thing you need to do is look at the number you're adding. So the number that you're adding is 32. Is the number that you're adding larger than the first number? Yes, 32 is larger than 16. Okay, If your second number is larger than your first number, then your result is going to be positive. It's going to be a positive number. Right? So I'll just put a little plus to indicate that it's going to be a positive number. And then what you do is you're finding the difference 32 between the bigger number and the smaller number. So you do 32 minus 16. Let me put that on this side. Right, 6 from 2. No, we put a 2 here. 12. 6 from 12 is 6. 1 from 2 is 1. So your answer is going to be 16. Let's look at it in a different way. Suppose we had negative 40 plus 30. Is the number you're adding greater than 40, greater than your first number? 30 is not greater than 40. As in, you're ignoring the negative sign before, right? So 30 is less than 40. So that means that instead, you're going to have a negative answer. Okay, so if the number you're adding is greater than the first number, then that means you're going to get a positive number. If your number that you're adding is less than your first number, you ignore the sign in front of the first number. 30 is less than 40. That means you're going to end up with a negative number. And then you do the same thing again. You find the difference between both numbers. So 40 and 30. 0 from 0 is 0. 3 from 4 is 1. So your answer is negative 10. Let's do another example. Let's say you wanted to do negative 57 plus 88. You're looking at these two numbers, okay? 88 is larger than 57. You're ignoring the sign. If your second number, the number you're adding, is larger than the first number, you're going to have a positive number. So this is going to be a positive number, okay? And then what you do next is you find the difference between those numbers. So 88 minus 57. 7 from 8 is 1. 5 from 8 is 3. So your answer is positive 31. Again, I know these are tricky. There will be lots of questions like this in the practice problem set that you can work on. Let's do another example. And before we do another example, I'm just going to write down at the side what it is we're doing. Okay, so this is what we're seeing. We have a negative number minus a positive number. You're looking if the number you're adding is greater than the first number without the negative sign, then your answer will be positive. If it's not greater, then your answer will be negative. Then the next step you do is you find the difference between the two numbers to give you the final answer. So again, let's look at an example. All right, so we're going to continue looking at another example. We have negative 75 plus 100. Okay, so we look at the number we're adding. The number that we're going to be adding is 100. Is 100 greater than the first number without the sign? The first number is 75. 100 is larger than 75, so therefore your answer is going to be positive. Then the next step will be to find the difference between these two numbers. So 100 minus 75. Right, we're going to have to go all the way to hundreds. We're going to take 100. We're left with 0. We're going to add a 10 here. Then we're going to take a 10 to be left with 9. And we have 10 ones. So 5 from 10 is 5. 7 from 9 is 2. And 0 from 0 is 0. So our answer is plus 25. Let's try another one. Suppose instead we had negative 75. So negative 75 plus 41. Okay, we look at the number we're adding, which is 41. Is 41 greater than the first number without the sign, which is 75? Is 41 greater than 75? No, it is not. It is less than. So therefore, our answer will be negative. And then the last step is we find the difference between them. So 75 minus 41. 1 from 5 is 4. 4 from 7 is 3. My final answer is negative 34. So again, negative numbers are a little bit tricky. We've learned a lot in this lesson. This brings us to the end of the lesson, but there will be a lot of practice problems that you could work on and look at the solution so you really understand how to work with negative numbers. So this brings us to the end of this lesson. This is Introduction to Mathematics Intermediate Level. This course is facilitated by Limitless Learning TT, where it's all about learning on the go. Log into our website from any place at any time and view past videos, practice problems, and solutions for your course. For more information on the services we offer, you can visit our website at www.limitlesslearningtt.com. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can always send us an email at info@limitlesslearningtt.com.